Welcome to NeuroMovement Revolution with Anat, Baniel, where you will discover breakthrough possibilities for your life through the brain's power to change. We're so happy that you can join us in making the impossible possible.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone, for whom it is morning now.
So you may notice that we're in a different setting this week. We're actually in Nevada.
Yeah, in a hotel room.
And we are here because we are teaching segment 3 of our children's mastery training. A group of 100 absolutely incredible students. It's just magical. I mean, every segment is magical, and the children's training just beyond magical. And Anat, as always, is on supreme teaching form. I mean, it's just been extraordinary, and it's only the beginning of day 4.
Yes.
And it feels like we've been here a long time already, just because it's been so rich and so dense.
Yeah. And just to say that the children mastery, for people who don't know, it's after practitioners complete their basic training, they have the option to continue to specialize. And children mastery are the 4 segments that starting this year are going to become 5 segments of how to work with kids, focusing on the very young age, 0 to 2 to 5 and so on, and then on autism, and then on thinking and cognition. So it's a remarkable process. And for me personally, I keep understanding more, figuring things out more. My colleagues are all also doing the same. So it just gets better from cycle to cycle.
And I see already we've got Elke on from Belgium, so welcome. And I thought before we get into the first main topic, we've actually announced that this Thursday we're hosting a complimentary online screening of the documentary A Life Unbound by Jordi Triefer about Anat Baniel method NeuroMovement. It focuses particularly on 2 people that we worked with, a little boy with cerebral palsy and a young woman with stroke. And Anat is interviewed in it, and you see their progress, and there are several major figures in the neuroscience world, like Michael Merzenich, Jill Bolte-Taylor, Martha Herbert, that are also interviewed in the movie. So we've done one of these already, and this Thursday we're going to actually have 2 showings, and one of them I requested that it was specially done at a time that made it easy for people in Europe to watch, because as you know, I'm from England, and I'm very keen that we cater to Europe. So there will be a screening at 9 a.m. Pacific time in California, which is...
It's okay. We don't have to put too much. People can figure it out. Yeah. And
then there's another one at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. So, yes, 9 a.m. in the morning and 5:30 in the afternoon. So we hope to see you there. There's a link on our website where you can sign up to register for it. Yeah. And now...
Yeah.
Moving forward, so the topic of episode 18 of the podcast is the learning switch. It's the 7th essential for positive brain change. Do you want me to read our little blurb about it?
Absolutely.
Okay. The brain is either in a learning mode, i.e. the learning switch is on, or not. Healthy young children have their learning switch on and the dial turned to high. Their eyes are bright, their movement lithe, and they are full of energy. Repetition, drills, and everyday stresses, as well as habitual patterns of thought, exercise, and emotions, all tend to turn the learning switch off. The same happens when a child has special challenges or a person has suffered trauma or injury. For the brain to properly do its job, the learning switch needs to be on. Once on, at any age, life becomes a wonderful new adventure filled with movement, creativity, and new possibilities.
And it's actually true. So it sounds good. And it's okay. So the learning switch. I'll try to speak to just for a few minutes and then open to questions from, you guys that are listening now, watching the podcast. So I actually had a few experiences that I'll mention a couple that woke me up to the fact that we are either somehow in a state where we are learning whatever comes in, whatever experiences or interventions seem to move us to be able to do or think or solve problems we couldn't do before. And then there are other situations where that doesn't happen. The first one was actually very personal, and I haven't told it more generally. As you know, my teacher was Dr. Feldenkrais, and I started working with him, and every time I got a session, it transformed me, transformed my life. The sessions were 25 minutes long. I would get one a week, and it was remarkable. I was in my very early 20s then. And then I actually, he was gone, and I took a few sessions from people who learned with him, and the sessions were very pleasant. And I did feel some changes, like, I don't know, maybe my legs got more I could move them a little more flexibly. I don't remember those details. And then he came back. He was overseas, and he came back, and I went back and got the lesson from him. And as the lesson was taking place and it was over and I stood up, I went like, oh, that's what it's all about. It's about learning. I get that. And then I forgot all about it. And I just, life continued. And the thing repeated itself actually a year later, or about 10 months later, where he was gone again. And I went to get lessons from roughly the same group of people. And it was very pleasurable, and it was useful in certain ways. And I liked it. And then he came back, and I went back to get the sessions from him. And I got my very first session, and I went like, oh, that's what it's all about. It's about learning. And I never forgot it anymore. I mean, that became what I cared about. That inner experience, I couldn't necessarily name what I learned, but I learned to recognize it as a feeling, as a state, as how, what is happening to me. So I also saw it, then I started seeing it in so many places, both in terms of my personal experience and also starting to work myself. When I started doing the work with people and then started evolving it, especially when I started working with children, that's when there was this, the work before was amazing with musicians and so on, but the children, there was a whole different quality. There was a urgency, there was an importance, and I became deeply and intensely aware that I depend on the child. The child needs to learn. I can't make it go in there. I can't make the child know something. The child needed a process to move from A to B, from not being able to do something to being able to do it. And that is when, and then one time I went into a place where I was invited to teach, and I had a group of people that were really, really, really good at relaxation. And they were very willing to follow my instructions, but they were very sweet, and they did the movements, but they felt like blobs to me, like blobs of jello on the floor doing the movements. And I realized they were doing the movements, but they were not learning. The thing where the brain wakes up and goes like, oh, what about this? And I can go here. And of course, the brain doesn't do that, but that's the description of what I feel. And that's when the idea of the learning switch became very, very clear. And the last one that I want to tell you was, and I don't know if I told you before, my apologies, I taught a workshop for physical therapists in New York. And one of the physical therapists brought in one of her little clients, 4 years old. And the child couldn't crawl, couldn't stand independently on all fours. And I did a demo. And in the demo, the child got on all fours and actually took her first few steps of crawling. And the therapist, sincerely, she said, how come with you she got to do it, and with me she didn't? Because I do the same thing as you do. And, being with a scientific background, I said to her, I don't think we do the same thing, since the girl got a different outcome. But let me think about it. Let me think what it is that I may be doing differently. Because she said, I also bent her knees and did this with her and moved her pelvis or whatever she saw me doing. And that was a really great question she asked me, because it got me to think, what about what I'm doing is different, that gives a different result than this physical therapist who also moved the legs and the head and whatever it was that she did. And that's when I realized that I do what I do in a way that wakes up the child's brain and upgrades the quality with which it works. It shifts it to a mode of learning. And I call that the learning switch, because that's what it felt like. It's either on or off, both in adults and in children. And when a child has stresses, medical health stresses, movement challenges, cognitive challenges, it tends to stress the system, and a system that's really stressed, very often it shuts down that kind of open-ended readiness to move in different directions and figure new things out, because that's unsafe. And anxiety and stress tend to limit us, to stop us, to rely on what we already have. So the learning switch is creating the condition, not trying to make the child do the things they're supposed to do that they can't do, but we don't learn 24/7. When the brain really learns, 15 to probably 20, 25 minutes is the maximum unit that is available for the brain to really do something productive. Then you just live life, and then the child eats and maybe naps, and maybe they can take another 20, 25 minutes of this kind of process, and then just hang out and integrate and do whatever, and then maybe another 10 minutes of that later. I mean, the 20 to 15, 25 is like a session, right? It's a private session with a practitioner. But as a parent or as a grandmother or also physical therapist, but first of all, at home, and you look to create conditions, and some of the things is one of the things that tends to wake up the learning switch is starting where the child is at. So if the child is now focused on blue balls that are in the bucket, we start with blue balls. We move them, we talk about them. The child can reach themselves, they reach, we give it to each other. We draw blue balls on a piece of paper. I'm just giving a completely example that I've never done, right? Yeah. Neil, you want to say something here?
Well, I think with any of the essentials, people get stuck of like, oh my God, how do I start? I taught the 5-day parent-child workshop last year in Colorado with Deb Deppy. And, even something like movement with attention, people think, I've got to generate some special movement with my child. No, as Anat said, you start where they are with what they're doing. Everything is an opportunity to bring in some aspect of one essential or another. And as she said, you don't want to do it 24 hours a day, but, every daily activity, like, if you're changing a diaper, that's an opportunity to think, well, how can I do this activity in a way that my child is actually aware of what's going on, is interested in what's going on, feels as though they're participating in what's going on? Because once that happens, then their learning switch is on.
Yeah. So basically, all the essentials that we talked about up till now, they actually create conditions that in kind of promote the learning switch to turn on. Now, you can do the essentials, and if the child is really hungry or really tired or is feeling unsafe because they're in a new environment or something like that, then it probably won't turn the learning switch on. We kind of have to be reasonable, kind of down to earth a bit, and look at what is going on. But if you're at home and you have a little bit of time and you're going to feed your child and they're sitting in a high chair and I don't know, you can, you know, and the child is interested and I don't know what they're interested, you can take time out for yourself, time out of having to accomplish something in the next 5-10 minutes. So if you have to accomplish something with your child in the next 5-10 minutes, then don't do it then. But then you can create a distinction, a clear distinction for the child by saying to the child, I'm going to pick you up, I'm going to put your clothes on, and then we're going to go to the car and drive over to grandma. Right? So you say it and you do it. And then that's a distinction, which what I call, should have been in the, I'm going to put it somewhere in the future. Let me tell you how it's going to go. Very, very important. That's your leadership. That is something that occurs every day, numerous times with taking care and interacting with children. It can also happen in maybe slightly different language, but with an adult. This is how I'm going to be doing it. I understand that if you don't like that, you can go to see another movie or, whatever. You can even do it with adults. We can make it a little fluffier and less direct. I'm Israeli, so that's my tendency. But Israeli originally, live in the States. But the thing is but then the other one is there's time. And where there's time, you can start slowing down, doing some movement with attention, looking to see if your child is interested in anything at that moment. Start there. If not, see if you can call their attention into something. Because let me tell you, the more 5 minutes, 10 minutes installments of waking up and working with an awake learning switch, the brain learns to learn. You see, we don't just learn. Learning is another skill. So it's not like learning, yes, no learning. It's can become, and the child can become a more and more potent and powerful learner. And the children with challenges need to become more potent and powerful learner than your sort of typically developing child, because they have the challenges. So they need a brain that can problem solve at a higher level than what is required in the more normal process and progression. And that is what I was doing differently than the physical therapist. I was doing it in a way that called upon that little girl, to start feeling and noticing and turning on her learning switch. And then what she did with what I provided was miraculous. So I think maybe let's open it to questions.
Absolutely, but moving on from that, that's what you were doing that was differently, and that's what you have striven to figure out ways to teach us to do in the training. I mean, this is what the basis of the children's training is about, and the work with adults.
Yeah, and just yesterday, I'm teaching. I have my colleague, my trainers colleagues also do at least 50% of the teaching. I do about 40-50%. And I was teaching the afternoon, and I looked at this sea of wonderful 100 people that I now know each one of them. And I saw how they were performing, doing the lesson, how they were listening, and the lessons get more complex and more challenging. And it was remarkable. It was like different people than a year and a half ago, in a wonderful way, just more blossoming, more fully themselves, can do a lot more, less pain, so on and so forth.
Okay.
Questions?
So, first of all, there's a question not related to the learning switch. This is from Elke, who was from Belgium, I mentioned earlier. I wonder when you will come to Europe, Brussels perhaps, to give a training there. I think more people from Europe are interested to become an ABM trainer.
Well, we are looking it won't happen in the near future, but I think we will be doing a training in Europe maybe in a couple years, or we're looking into it. So
it's certainly nothing
we'll keep you
definite
posted.
yet, but we have, an increasing number of
Yes.
European practitioners already. So there is a presence in Europe for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
Okay, and from Kavita in London. Hi, Kavita. Can the learning switch be on when a child is asleep? For instance, can an ABM lesson be productive if the child is asleep during the session?
The answer is yes. Definitely. Sometimes I even, there are certain things that I want to do that require great delicacy and precision. And with a child, especially when they get to move more, might be a little less opportunity to get to that until they learn to lie very, very still, which they do. But then I find it as a great opportunity. Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely. Question from Aliyah. My pediatrician wants me to sleep train because my son doesn't sleep well, but I'm not keen to do this. I'm not keen due to the stress this will put on his nervous system and fear he will regress in his learning due to this. Can you teach a child to learn to sleep better?
Well, Aliyah, I have no idea what kind of training your pediatrician and you're referring to. So the word train to sleep can mean infinite number of things. So it's a little hard for me. If you can type in and say a little bit more detail what entails in that, I don't want to guess. I will come back and answer your question. Thank you.
So this is from Anuradha Ramamurthy. Hi.
Okay.
Hari, we've worked with Hari. My son Hari, he's in ABM very actively for 2 years with us and with Sharon and Adrienne. Every time he goes into the closet, he throws and tosses all the clothes. After a minute, he helps to pick them up and put them back. Why does he do it in the first place, to sneak into the closet and throw and then feel sorry? I'm curious how to understand what's happening so I know what to do.
Well, does he feel sorry? I mean, how do you know he feels sorry? But he obviously, I mean, I don't know, because what happens when he throws? Does he get scolded? Does he, I don't know what. But one thing, Anuradha, that you can do, since he likes doing it, instead of waiting for him to sneak and do it, how about, this is a perfect example of going with what the child is already doing. It takes a certain degree of freedom and liberation from how we were raised and what we think is right and wrong, good and bad. I mean, first of all, let's feel lucky that he's throwing clothes to the floor and not dishes, because that would need to be stopped in a very different way, right? So also a little bit of sense of humor and kind of creativity. So, for example, I would just, I don't know, in the morning or wherever he would have the opportunity to sneak, is say to him, Harry, would you like to go to the closet and throw the clothes down to the floor? And you say, I would like to come with you and let's do it together. Or do you want to do it yourself? You see, you start giving him distinctions. First of all, that he recognizes whether he wants to do it or not. If he was scolded in the past, you say, I promise I'm not going to get upset, honey. You want to do it? He says no, he might get all discombobulated. And you say, fine, I'll ask you again in a little while. And let's say he said yes. And let's say he said no to you coming with him. You say, okay, call me when you are done, because I'd like to come and help you put the clothes back in place. And then let's say he said yes to that. I mean, depends. You know, it's all those junctions, and it depends on where the tree branch grows, right? And then you go and you say, What are we going to put up first? I don't know which closet he goes himself or so on. So if it's your closet, let's say it's his closet, you say, shall we put back up the pants or the blue shirt or the red shirt? You start creating intentionality and distinctions, and you get that brain to go like, which shirt? What is she talking about? You train him. He gets trained. You don't train him, but he gets the opportunity to utilize himself with this quality. Then you can do that, and then don't do it for 2 hours. Don't do it forever. When you see that he loses interest, you say, how about we leave those clothes that are still on the ground and go out and have a snack? And you say to him, I'll put the rest up this time. So it's not educational. It's not correctional. It's not trying to make him know he did something bad it's because he seems interested in doing it, but he's probably also afraid of the reaction. And this is an example you can use, as long as it's safe, with anything, because you will start getting a child that is a thinker. He knows better how to think. He knows better how to intend. And a brain that can do that better can organize movement better. And movement is organized better, organizes the brain to think better. That's the learning switch. Very important. Do not drill. If the child learns something new, that's the time to stop, not to start drilling. Then you come back to it later. It's the opposite of, because people say, you have to practice. Not in the learning itself. It's in the habituation and automation of what you've learned. But if you're in the learning, you want to use it some so it can grow. Anyway, next question.
So Elena asks, could you please tell us more about turning on our own learning switch? From the book, I got the impression that meditation and mindfulness can help. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena, for asking this question. It's so, so, so important. As an adult, first of all, you've right now taken the first step, or if you've done it before, but it's the first step to say, am I in a learning mode or am I not? Or at least knowing I could be in a learning mode and not. And then you can start learning to recognize it. So, for example, walking back here to the hotel room, I was carrying my bag. And I've noticed 4 days ago that I pretty much always carry my bag in the left hand or on the left shoulder, no matter what else my poor left hand is doing. So I started going like, okay, how about I carry it some on the right? What does it feel to carry on the right? I put it back on the left. Why? How come the preference is just automaticity? And then I realized, well, I carry my weight better on the left leg, so probably carrying weight on the left side is a little more secure for the system. I don't expect you to do it to this degree of necessarily observations that I can do in this respect. But this is already bringing the learning switch into that. And then I'm coming back up, and sure enough, I notice, my bag is in my left hand again. I haven't changed that much yet, So it's just a little example, and applying all the essentials. Anytime, and in that way, meditation could be a mechanism for turning on the learning switch. It's very powerful, and very highly trained meditators have capabilities, cognitive and other kinds of capabilities that are above what most people have. However, it doesn't have to take so much work and so long. Movement with attention turns on, just gets the brain going, just wakes it up. So when you pay attention to how you move and what you feel, you have turned the learning switch on. And you may notice that if you're really, really tired, you've drank a couple glasses of wine, and you start saying, I better turn my learning switch on. Every cell in your body says, not now, please. I'm too tired, or I've done too much for today. And then just use the essentials and intend to feel, slow down, notice, and you will discover that you're doing things in new ways. And let us know in 2 weeks or 4 weeks whether that's working for you. And if it's not working, we'll come back and look for other ways. Yes.
I was going to ask you, before we bring this part of the podcast to a close, do you want to say something about what the learning switch looks like when you see a child in the learning mode? Because, sometimes I'm very aware I'm giving a lesson to a child and I can just, the learning is palpable, but they look as though they might be checked out.
Yeah, well, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
With the children, and also in a regular classroom, which is very important, the teachers know that, and of course the parents. So let's say you present something to a child or you give them a certain distinction. Let's go back to the closet example. And maybe your Harry just he stops and just sort of looks like he's staring into space. That's a moment where there is this internal activity of sorting out this kind of new thing and figuring it out. So the child looks like they're checked out, or in the lesson sometimes they just stare and the eyes stop moving, they stop blinking. So it looks the opposite. Learning is not when they go, no, it's when and in that way, it is very similar to the state of truly profound, intentional, wakeful meditation. So yes, give your child space to experience themselves. Learning is a very subjective, it's their experience. They need to feel it. They need to notice it. And we need to let their brain and their cells to sort it out and do something with it. So when you do something with a child, you give them space. That's also why drilling and fast and repetitions are very often the opposite of learning. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us for this half hour on the Learning Switch, and let us know. And if you have any questions, by the way, you feel free to send questions between, podcasts.
And we actually, welcome people sending questions in advance. So if you see the podcast is coming up and you see what the topic is,
or anything,
or any question, but please do send questions in advance, especially if you know you're going to be on the broadcast. That would be fantastic. So thank you, and stay tuned for our next episode.
Thank you for joining us on NeuroMovement Revolution with Anat Baniel. You will find all of our podcasts and additional resources on our website at www.anatbanielmethod.com. You can also subscribe to this podcast for free on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and TuneIn. We look forward to seeing you online for our next NeuroMovement Revolution.